Hey everyone, it's Austin in the middle, and I hope you're doing well today. So, a lot of you that know this channel and are associated with my other channels have been asking me to give my thoughts on this new revival miniseries that released on Disney Plus and Hulu for Malcolm in the Middle, because everybody that knows me knows how big of a fan I am of the IP. I grew up with Malcolm in the Middle, the TV show airing on Fox. I had many home VHS recordings of various episodes I would tape. I grew up with the season 1 DVD box set, and I'm still pissed till this day we've never got a complete series DVD box set of the show at all, which is a travesty if you ask me. But I am very well aware about the fandom of Malcolm in the Middle, because in the mid 2000s, when the internet was still kind of like not that popular, I was in Google Hangouts talking with a lot of other fellow Malcolm in the Middle fans, talking about our favorite episodes, our favorite characters, our least favorite episodes and stuff. And that carried through until my high school years, until streaming like Netflix came out on the scene and started putting the show on there. And I was able to watch the show basically as a comfort show for many years until it moved to Hulu, and then I continuously watch it there. I've seen Malcolm in the Middle 13 times through in its completeness over my lifetime, and I'm currently casually watching it through a 14th time. I'm addicted to the show. There's something about it that really captures, I think, everybody's mindset of the 2000s, and quite honestly, I think a lot of people miss media that echoes the sentiment that that original show does about life in general. So when this new reboot came out, Malcolm in the Middle, Life is Unfair, and I started seeing pictures and hearing casting rumors like Eric Sullivan not playing Dewey but being recasted by this new actor that quite frankly looks just fucking like adult Eric Sullivan. I don't know how they managed to pull that off, but holy shit. That was pretty much on the spot casting there. Hearing that Malcolm was going to be introduced having an estranged daughter, or I guess a daughter that's estranged from his whole family, and there's going to be a family reunion subplot, and essentially that this 4-episode miniseries is going to be kind of like an unofficial 4-part episode, or you can actually say movie in some regards. And hearing some choices about certain characters that kind of made me raise my eyebrows, but after seeing it, it ain't a big deal. So everybody out there worrying that if this show is quote unquote woke or anything like that, you heard it from me. This show ain't woke. And to all the people out there clamoring that they hate this revival or reboot because they don't like one character being gay or one character being non-binary, get over your fucking self, man. It ain't woke like the way people are describing it at all. And I wouldn't even put that vernacular on the show, period. It just happens to have diverse characters, which is not a bad thing. Malcolm in the Middle has always been an inclusive show. So people out there bitching about this, really get the fuck over it, man. Seriously. I don't know what else to tell you. But yeah, Malcolm in the Middle. All right. I'm genuinely being honest here about my fandom. I love pretty much the entire original show. I only really find one bad episode to be had from that original show, and that's Kitty's Back, which I think is the most universally hated, like deep cut fan hated episode from the original run for a lot of reasons. And I had somebody comment on my YouTube video on the top 5 worst episodes, and I think the comment got eaten. But somebody was trying to like tell me ahead of time before I started watching the show that they think that the whole miniseries as a 4-parter is collectively worse than anything from the original show. So I was like, all right, and then once the show initially came out the first day, it had like a 2.5 star rating on a certain app that I follow. And I was like, all right, maybe there is some credence here. So I went into watching it with kind of like my expectations tampered a little bit, and knowing some things like I mentioned beforehand that kind of made my eyebrows raise a little bit. And I have to say, after watching all 4 episodes in this 4-part miniseries, I was very entertained. I wouldn't say I loved this revival, if I'm being honest. There are some things as a massive fan that I'm going to say that probably aren't going to register well for a lot of people that I think have maybe only ever seen the show when it was airing in the 2000s, or maybe have watched it only a few times through, maybe not all the way through once. And I get that, right? I will say this up front. I am somebody that is a mega nerd about this show. I even brought these out to show you. I'm even obsessed with the books. I read these as a kid. I have them as an adult. These are like the 5 ones that are exclusive to the books that are essentially episodes that never got made in the show. So these are like 5 additional stories. If you're curious and you've watched the original show and you watched the revival and you want some more Malcolm in the Middle content, go read all of these books. These are really good, in my opinion, for the most part. And some of these actually will remind you of some old episodes, if you get my drift. But because maybe, just maybe, they're like prototype scripts for certain episodes. So yeah, go check those out. I'm a massive nerd, right? I've read every story that Malcolm has put out in the ether. I've watched every episode. There's very few things I deem that I don't like. And most of the things I don't like are things that I find non-canon. The big question for a few of you out there, to me privately, before I hopped on here to do this review, is, do I view Malcolm in the Middle, Life is Unfair as canon material? Well, to be honest, there are a few things that irk me because, in my opinion, if they were way worse than what they were, I would view it non-canon. But because it was handled the way it was, and because stuff made enough sense, because of the massive time jump into the future and how people change over 2 decades, I can let a lot slide. So yes, I do view this miniseries as canon. Now, to give you a rundown about the miniseries, in case you haven't seen it, there are going to be some spoilers in this, so I can just kind of recap to let you know that I watched the thing. It's essentially about Malcolm being in his late 30s. He runs a nonprofit. He might dabble a little bit into politics. We find out pretty early on that he still looks down on people because he's a genius and he's super smart. But he reveals to us that the reason why he's able to be nice about it these days and work functionally with people that he views as inferior is because he's basically written off his family. And over these past 2 decades, ever since he went to Harvard in the finale of the original show, he very rarely pays them any mind and pays them a visit, because we see in flashbacks that his family gets under his skin still. It makes him do things irrationally, it makes him behave like how he used to in the original show. Particularly in like seasons 5 through 7, which a lot of fans have deemed as Malcolm's least favorable seasons. And we get a grip on Malcolm's character that Malcolm's changed, maybe for the better in some aspects, but he's still the same person. He's still that narcissist. He's still that asshole that we really don't like. And it's made very apparent once we realize the gravity of the situation of the rest of the Wilkerson family. Yes, to all the people out there that doubt that the Wilkerson name is the family name, watch the fucking pilot with Francis's name tag. It's always been the Wilkersons. Even on Google Hangout days in the mid-2000s, people would flame you if you didn't call them the Wilkersons. That's their family name. It's just never been officially stated in episode. So, take that. When we get caught up to speed with everyone else, we learn that Malcolm's parents, Lois and Hal, are having an anniversary party. And we see that Francis and Piyama are staying in the garage to be in town for the anniversary party. We see Dewey is off in Europe, but he's doing FaceTiming while Lois and Hal are doing his shaving routine that we saw in the pilot episode of the original show as a callback, right? And we also see there's a new sibling living in the house named Kelly, who is a non-binary character. and they are the youngest sibling that was teased in the finale of the original series, where Lois and Hal realized they were pregnant again. Kelly is that child from that pregnancy. And then we also, of course, see Reese, who I guess is a reoccurring presence. He tends to stop by his parents' house. I guess he lives nearby or whatnot. And we get caught up to speed with a few side characters as well. Mainly being like Hal's poker friends, Craig Feldspar, Lois's stalker from the original show. We get caught up with that, and we hear Hal's plan of trying to do things exorbitantly nice for Lois over the 4-part miniseries to get her, I guess, in the spirit of the party. And we learn that the Wilkersons, without like saying anything, if you look around the house, it looks very different. And it seems that since the kids have moved out of the house, they've been able to actually put some money into renovating their home. And Reese has actually been taken upon himself to help Hal with renovations to get the house up and tidy and looking nice. We see like new wall paint, which is basically just whites and muted grays, which makes this setting and backdrop kind of drab and very uncanny valley for some reason. I don't necessarily like it, but that's what you're going to notice. It is still the old house layout, and it's still the old house outside. They just painted it blue now, and the yard looks more kempt now that the kids aren't destroying things all the time because they have their own places that they live at. And, of course, we learn about some other characters like Jamie, which is, I guess, the 5th brother, became like a Coast Guard military man and all that, and he's off doing his own thing, blah, 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 blah. But the smoking gun for the catalyst of this whole miniseries is that Malcolm has been keeping a secret from his family, and that he's had this daughter who's now a teenager all these years, and he's never told his family about her. And we get to meet his daughter, who's named Leah, and we see her going to this private school, and she does her own fourth wall breaks, and she has her own quarrels with her dad about feeling too sheltered and feeling like her dad has never let her be exposed to, I don't know, the things that he was exposed to growing up. But we learn from Malcolm's perspective that he does that to protect her because he wants her to be perfect, blah, 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 blah. And what ends up happening is Malcolm comes up with this harebrained scheme to essentially get out of going to his parents' anniversary party. And once Lois and Hal hears that he's trying to bail, they drive straight to his house. But when they do, we not only see that Malcolm, who, by the way, I haven't really gone over this, he has a girlfriend named Tristan that we learn about, who is essentially his new steady girlfriend. And this is like, I guess, the first woman he's tried seriously dating since Leah's mom was taken out of the picture, supposedly for just being crazy and whatnot. And we see that Leah and Tristan are potentially going to meet each other for the first time, and Malcolm's done his typical neurotic things, trying to prep them so everything goes perfectly, and they bond over Malcolm being neurotic and blah, blah, blah. Well, Lois and Hal storm in at the end of the first episode, and not only learn the existence of their granddaughter, and Leah finally learns that her grandparents never were killed or dead this whole time when she's constantly asked her dad about her grandparents. We see Malcolm bolt out of his house and disappear. And for the better parts of part 2 and part 3 of the 4-parter, we essentially get caught up to speed with Malcolm, who ends up like in a horse stable area in the beginning of episode 2, and he calls Stevie for some advice, and we learn that Stevie has his own kid with his husband. Yes, for everybody out there wondering, Stevie is gay in the revival, which is very odd because I always thought Stevie was like one of the straightest characters growing up. Because anytime there was like naked girls or shams to get dates to prom, or any like, milking him being handicapped so you can get a kiss from the girl, or like lap seats from a girl, he would have done it. So, it kind of struck me as strange, but seeing Craig Lamar, I forget his name, was it Craig Lamar Burton back playing Stevie was great. With his earplugs and all. I used to have gauges myself, so that's really cool. And he gives them advice, basically saying, well, you made your bed. Now your daughter is going to be involved with this family, whether you like it or not. You're going to have to basically nut up and get over it. So Malcolm begrudgingly goes back home. He confronts Leah. Leah tells him how pretty much a big piece of shit he is for lying and keeping a secret. But Leah takes it upon herself to be like, all right, well, if you want to lie to me, I can keep a secret from you and get to know my family. So Leah decides to FaceTime her family, and she gets to talk with her grandparents and her uncles, Francis, Dewey, Jamie, all of them, and even Kelly to a degree. And then after that call, we learned that Lois is infuriated with Malcolm and infuriated by Reese because at the home, we learned that Reese has only been helping Hal this whole time because he's been filming him embarrassing himself and putting videos on the internet and also selling his underwear to pervs. Okay, Reese. And Kelly, who is basically the antithesis to Reese now, they come after Reese and say, look, I'm going to tattle on you, and it's going to be glorious. And, of course, Hal oversees their conversation. And Hal, Bryan Cranston's a legend, and he's probably still the best performer in this show, even in this revival. He is so heartbroken over the pipe bomb that he learned at Malcolm's house that he's basically like clutching his chest. And when he sees what Reese has done, he collapses on the floor, and everybody tries to roll him out and get him in bed. And even later, Lois tries to cheer him up by offering sex to him, and he denies it, which is something that he never does, in case you don't know Hal's character. But Reese goes off and does that. But on a more wholehearted note, we learn that Francis and Piyama are going to have a baby. And they're finally pregnant after all these years. I think it was maybe season 6 or season 7 when Francis and Piyama dropped the hint that they were going to start trying to have a kid. And I guess it's taken a very, very, very long time for them to get pregnant. And it's finally happened. And Lois, one of the funniest things is talking about the order of importance. It puts Francis at number 8, which causes Francis to spiral a little bit. And we see that old school classic Francis versus Lois feud going on, right? Which I thought was hilarious. Meanwhile, Dewey and Jamie are basically off doing their own thing out of the picture. And Dewey speaks French for some reason, and then Jamie smokes and is on a military base. Okay. But then we learned that Tristan, Malcolm's girlfriend, doesn't want anything to do with him, and Malcolm basically spends the whole rest of the episode kind of feeling ashamed for what he did. And we also see that Leah gets some advice from her family while on that call to kind of confront, I guess, some bullies that she's been going through, and does the right thing. It feels good. And she catches the attention of this boy who she befriends and kind of likes. Which brings us into the third episode where Hal decides to go on a spiritual journey to try to heal himself. And he goes to Richie, which is one of Francis's former friends, to essentially get some herbal medicine to unlock the answers that he needs. And he takes too many milligrams and basically trips out for the whole episode, seeing shit that's not there. And then Lois spends the whole episode essentially trying to knock some stuff down on the list, and also combating Francis for Francis coming at her and berating her for not being excited about him and Piyama's pregnancy. And then there's like this whole thing where she buys booties for the kid and what have you there. And then on Malcolm and Leah's end, Leah is trying to get, I guess, Tristan on board with getting back with her dad, so they can go to this reunion so she can meet more of Malcolm's family that she's never met in person, and also to kind of give Malcolm some redemption for Tristan. So they came up with this kidnapping plot to kidnap him and take him all the way to his hometown and what have you there. And yeah, basically there's a little more setup to the opening of episode 4 with Lois going to pick up Hal from his vision quest and Hal being extremely high, and they get in a car accident, which starts episode 4 off where we see that Lois has broken her foot. Hal might still be a little high, but the party must go on. And the whole gang ends up at this banquet hall where we see a bunch of characters from years past, going back to Marlin Academy, going back to Alaska, going back to Otto's Dude Ranch, the Krellboynes, a couple of old side characters that if you have to really be paying attention to see, like, oh, that was the kid that Reese used to bully. That was Dewey, and then you see maybe a handful of Dewey's, I guess, friends from his behavioral class and whatnot, kind of strewn about in there. And we get a couple of lighthearted jokes, but the main gist is that Malcolm shows up with Tristan and Leah, and the whole family's finally together again. And then Malcolm sees pretty much the gravity of what he's done and how he sees, like, he's kept Leah away from his family because he thought he was doing good, but it's really done a disservice for her. And when he sees that everybody made this really insightful message for Hal and Lois's anniversary, and he half-assed it, he felt really bad. And he finally has this heart-to-heart about why he did what he did to his mom. And his mom is basically real with him about it, and they hug it out. Not without some weird fart jokes from Craig and, you know, Reese trying to hide in the party because he's afraid to show his face about what he did to Hal and stuff like that. He's also afraid that Kelly's going to rat on him for being there. I don't want to be Malcolm in the Middle without having an over-the-top callback to the original finale of the original show. And that's basically all you need to know, which is essentially the whole kit and caboodle, right? There's a lot packed into these 4-part episodes. I would say majority of everything you need to know is in episodes 1 and 2. And episodes 3 and 4 kind of feel more lighter on what you need to know kind of stuff. And it's just kind of like the, you know, I guess episode 1 and 2 is building up, and then episode 3 and 4 is the drop down. So, yeah, I'm going to be upfront. These 4 episodes, to me, part of me likes that they went with this formula, and part of me doesn't. The reason why I say that is because growing up with Malcolm in the Middle, the most they ever had was like 2-parters. I think having like 2-parter concentric stories is rather nice, and I would have actually liked to see them explore that idea here, where they could have done part 1 and part 2, introducing the whole Malcolm and Lois and Hal, you know, feud, with the idea that, hey, this looming thing is going on. And they could have squashed it there and then moved on to parts 3 and 4, where we could have built on the siblings being around each other more again. We could have had a more old school feeling episode out of it, with like episode 3. Then episode 4, I guess, could have been as is, where they finally, like, you know, hug it out and move on from it. But for what it was, it did kind of feel dragged out. It did kind of feel like this was basically just a movie that they made a 4-part miniseries for some reason. I think it's maybe to help their ratings. I personally, you know, looking at the story as this, would have probably gone with a movie special, or like an hour-long special, or hour and 20-minute special, whatever the case would have been. But, you know, for what it was, it had its charming moments pretty much throughout it. The one glaring positive I can say about this revival is that all the characters that returned, even the new guy that plays Dewey, brought something that reminded me of the old show. And it's almost like that they never stopped understanding the characters they play. And it's pretty much pitch perfect to them being aged up 20 years. Everyone from Justin Burfield, Bryan Cranston, Jane Kaczmarek, Frankie Muniz, Christopher Kennedy Masterson, all of them did a fantastic job. Absolutely wonderful. And if they get a season 2, I hope that it's a big success, and maybe that could be the launch pad in case some of these guys want to keep doing a spinoff. Maybe that could be the jumping off point. I think at this point, everybody loves Frankie Muniz, and I do too. Trust me, I grew up with this stuff. Two of my favorite movies growing up were Agent Cody Banks and Big Fat Liar. And still, in a lot of ways, they are some of my favorite movies of all time. I love the guy, but if he's going to step away from acting and do NASCAR driving, I would still love a Lois and Hal Reese Francis spinoff show without Malcolm, right? If Malcolm's going to be off all that distance away from his family, have him come by every once in a while and be a reoccurring character, but maybe spin off into Francis and Piama having a kid or something like that, right? Have Reese in the picture as the as the uncle teaching the kids to do bad things, or bring in the kid that the new guy playing Dewey or something. I'm down for that. I think this revival kind of showed me that there is potential for a Malcolm in the Middle revival without Frankie Muniz if he didn't want to be there full time. I wouldn't call it Malcolm in the Middle. I think you would have to call it something else. But for what it's worth, I think everybody that brought it here really made me connect to being a kid again, and I loved it for that. All the fan service stuff with like the finale was incredible. I can go on and on and on and gush about seeing the Krellboynes and the Marlin Academy cadets and all of them. But I will say that if you're a lifelong fan or you're a fan of that original show, they pay a lot of respect to former characters like the guy who played Otto and the guy who played Commandant Spangler, who I think no longer are with us. I thought that was incredible that they did that. And there's a lot of heartfeltness in that finale that kind of, I guess, provides finality to that begrudging storyline between Malcolm and Lois that you can clearly tell was still there at the end of the original show. So for what it's worth, I like the way that it ended up and wrapped up. It was really cool seeing all the siblings grown up. I never would have thought Jamie would have been a military man, but one thing that I will say as a knock to Jamie is like, why was he in this revival? He was like hardly in it. But when we did get Jamie, it was kind of interesting seeing his personality being like the roid rager guy, the big gym rat, military buff kid, which I thought it was interesting. I would like to see him built up in a potential second season of this revival, because he had a lot of potential. I think he had some funny chops to him. Dewey, also the other character that's a big like disappointment for me. I was hoping to see this guy, I forget his name, is something Ellsworth. I know that he's super tall, and supposedly, from what I gather, they kept him on on a screen because of how tall he is. And when I say tall, he's like clearly like a head and shoulder above all the other Wilkinson family members. So maybe they did that strategically. I don't know. But I kind of wish we would have got him in person. But for what it's worth, them aging up Dewey to be like this rich guy, and also contextually is the one responsible for why Hal and Lois have been able to, I guess, bounce back financially. I think Dewey is easily the most well-off of the characters. He seems the most affluent and rich, and he has all these girls over in Europe. Good for you, Dewey. Francis and Piama. Francis, working his way up the corporate ladder, becoming a boss, having 15 people under him, finally becoming a father. I think Francis's arc, or I guess update to his character, is easily the best written of all the siblings, including Malcolm even. I was shocked by how well that came across and how far Francis has bounced back since AA from season 7, which is also another one of the worst episodes on the original show. Even though he does still have that mild resentment for Lois when it is there, you can clearly tell that he's grown up, right? Same thing for Reese, too. I was not expecting Reese to have multiple marriages and, be so upfront and honest about him just ruining marriages because he can't get past himself, and how he's making money still feels like a Reese scheme. Even though he's not bullying people and beating them up, he's abusing his dad and selling his underwear online to weirdos, which is, I think, still canon to Reese and something that he would do. And Reese got a lot of laughs out of me from this revival. Maybe next to Hal, which I think had the most. But yeah, that was wonderful. Kelly, the new sibling, I know a lot of people are, I guess, upset with them for some reason, but to me, Kelly has a lot of potential. I like that there are the antithesis to Reese, and I would love to see an episode in a potential season 2, maybe episode 1, of just all the siblings getting back together and going to the old 2000s show realm with them and having them come up with a plot together to get at Hal and Lois or something for revenge or something. I think that would be perfect. Seeing all as adults do this. But yeah, Kelly, I wish they got more things to work with other than being, I guess, Reese's thorn in his side. But for what it's worth, Kelly, I kind of enjoyed having a bonus sibling on there. And then with like Hal and Lois, I think Lois feels pitch perfect how she is. You can clearly tell that she's mellowed out now that the kids are older, and she no longer, I guess, holds on to that Y2K angst about like people are out to get us kind of thing. She's kind of become warm and more embraceful to community. She's kind of, become more emotionally relevant for her family. Growing up, she had to have that rough exterior because of those boys, but you can clearly tell that she's more open and honest these days than what she used to be, which is kind of refreshing. And then for Hal, I think Hal is probably the only character that I think still feels like the same character. I think that he's always been the sweetheart and the nice father, and him having all of these over-the-top moments, like clutching his chest like he's just got shot in the heart by Malcolm and all this, feels pitch perfect to his character. Even him turning down sex from Lois because he's depressed about how his family just, I guess, lies to him, right? I think it's relatable, and it's still sad that his kids walk all over him like that. But Hal, even though he sees that his kids lie to him and walk all over him, he still loves them unconditionally. So that still feels like him. The only character that I think, aside from Hal, still feels like him themselves is Malcolm, and that's a blessing and a curse for me with this revival. I think Malcolm, him having a daughter Leah, is cool, I guess, but Malcolm, in those later seasons of the original show, he was just way too much of a whiner and a narcissist. And I feel like, on one hand, as an adult, I can totally sympathize with him and not wanting his daughter Leah to grow up in that environment with that family, because it really did mess him up. It really did give him this complex that we saw him struggling with throughout the original show. And I can't dismiss that, right? I totally see why the writers of this reboot thought that this would be a realistic angle for Malcolm. And like I said, I get it to a degree. But as a fan, as somebody who grew kind of over time not to like Malcolm as much, and even Frankie Muniz has admitted over the years that Malcolm is the least likable character of the whole cast. Maybe that's the point. I don't know. But Malcolm is still the same old little shit. He's the same old whiner. And it's like everybody else has kind of moved along, still doing their own shtick, but, they seem to have some sort of a realistic approach to how to handle life. Where Malcolm, I don't think he ever deflated that ego bubble. I think that he took that into Harvard, he took that into adulthood when he had his daughter, and he got so in over his head that he got caught up in a lie, lying to his parents about even having a daughter, lying to his daughter about his grandparents being dead, trying to cover up his family, just so he can be controlling and control how his daughter is raised. It just, like I said, it feels realistic, but I don't like that direction for him. Even though he comes full circle at the end and he learns something from it, that's the saving grace to it all, I guess. But I did not enjoy that with the first 3 episodes, In hearing that, unfortunately, Leah's mom is crazy and out of the picture. That doesn't surprise me with Malcolm's love life in history. If you've seen the original show, a lot of questionable women that he was with, including the controversial one from season 7, the Burning Man episode. If you know, you know. But yeah, I don't know. And that brings me to, I guess, Leah, which is probably the biggest mixed bag character for me. I like the actress, it's not her fault. I just feel like her forced inclusion in the show felt unearned. You know what I mean? It felt like we got to meet a new character and give them the pedestal of breaking the fourth wall just so we can say, oh, that's Malcolm's daughter, blah, 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 blah. And while some people probably don't bat an eye to it as much as I do, I really don't feel like it was necessary anytime that she broke the fourth wall, because anytime she did, it was just to kind of commentate on catty girl relationships that we know aren't going to get fleshed out in this behemoth, giant, I don't know how to describe it, cast. Right? There's not enough time to just go into Leah's drama like the old show where they can just focus on one character. Because this is a 4 episode miniseries, that stuff isn't going to matter. And then the whole boyfriend stuff, and especially the stuff with her in the finale at the party, talking with him on the phone, that was just cringe. I'm sorry. Some people could find that funny. Maybe it's just because I'm, millennial. I don't know. But I didn't really find that funny. You know what I mean? The stuff they were talking about. And yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, and in terms of all the side characters, like some other ones like Craig, I do wish we saw more Craig. I do wish we had more Stevie, which brings me to Stevie. I guess we can talk about him and what they did, right? To me, I did bring this up in the Plata review. The stuff with Stevie being gay, I don't mind, like on like a personal level at all. I love that the show's always been inclusive. The fact that they had a character of color in the early 2000s that was a cripple is pretty inclusive, if you ask me. There was also a lot of progressive casting when it came to certain side characters and certain seasons when they're actually trying to commentate on real world issues, which the old show would do from time to time. It's a widely known show for being diverse and having a bunch of outcastish, well, I want to say outcastish, but characters from all walks of life, right? Including the outcasts, which is like the Krellboyne kids, right? And that's made up of a bunch of different archetypes and races, for that matter. So, I think that Malcolm has always been there to talk about hard-hitting topics. I mean, you look at season 6 with the episode with the janitor and them bringing like racism to the point of view of the episode. I mean, they've always tackled this stuff. So people that are out there shocked that a character is gay in this show just blows my mind. Like, get over it, man. It's Malcolm in the Middle. They've always done stuff like this, man. Maybe not having a main character, or I guess a main side character, become gay, which is not necessarily the problem with Stevie. It's just that out of all characters to make gay, I don't know why they picked Stevie, because Stevie, like I said, was always the one that was so gung-ho to be with the girls. One of my good friends brought this up to me in Discord, that they would have loved any of the other Krellboynes or any of Marlin Academy's characters, or maybe even Craig to a degree, be the gay one and not Stevie. But from what I gather, I heard that Stevie's actor, I guess, requested this, which is cool. And, like I said, it's not preachy or anything about it. It's not like in that, I don't know how to put this. It's not in that stereotypical, like, woke bashing way where people, like, really complain about how preachy it is, or how it can be in media from time to time. But it's not preachy at all here. It's just a thing that a character is. And if you're that upset about Stevie being gay, just get over it. It's just get over it, man. I don't know what else to say. And it's not something I want to continue talking about, so I'm just going to move on here, because we're already pretty deep in this review. But, yeah, the characters, for the most part, were really good. I really do think that they nailed the vibe in the delivery of the humor for the most part. Now, granted, the big missing ingredient I think that this revival has, or I guess doesn't have, is the fact that in the Y2K, in the time that Malcolm in the Middle came out, in the early to mid 2000s, there was so much nihilism in media. And that's why Malcolm in the Middle worked, is because it captured Americans' nihilism. Here, in this show, it feels modern. And like, it comes to talk about what's relevant today, right? Kind of, with like people trying to live day to day and stay connected in a digital world, I guess, which is, I guess, relevant. But what makes Malcolm in the Middle is the nihilism from every member of the family. From Lois thinks that the world's out to get them and trying to keep them poor, to Hal trying to work a dead end job just to make ends meet for his family, for the kids to grow up poor and jaded and have to bully others to either feel good about themselves or to get something that they want because they can't afford it. You know, that is what made Malcolm in the Middle Malcolm in the Middle. And the chagrin of all of that came from these characters suffering or perceived suffering of the world as a whole. I don't know, I don't feel like the characters exude that anymore. I feel like they've all moved past that. And now we're into like this like copacetic era for these characters, which I guess for character progression sense is cool. It makes sense narratively, but I have a hard time kind of comparing this to the old show because of how tonally different the old show is. Not to mention, and I've already brought this up, the new painting in the house is so drab looking. It's so uncanny valley that there's something about it that just makes it look like bland modern television stuff, and it doesn't stick out like the old show did from the mid 2000s, with either with the color choices of the house or the color grading itself. That is way superior in carrying the vibe of Malcolm in the Middle than this revival ever did. And you would think that like some of the smaller details would be ironed out. Like if you're a massive fan, right? They could have at least gone into the lore. You know, some of these go to the books and you have to really dig deep. Where Lois, if she had a daughter, wanted to name the daughter Camellia, right? Maybe that's Kelly's dead name. They could have at least hinted that, you know, to just be like, yeah, that happened. But I guess it's close enough to where you can kind of connect the dots there. There's a bomb shelter in the backyard that Piama and Francis are probably better off staying in, but they're sleeping in the garage for a guest room. They never really go into that. They don't really go into like how Reese and Craig were roommates and catching up with that. They don't go into really Dewey's career at all. Jamie's character doesn't get built on either. You know, just add this on to all the stuff I wanted for the characters on top of the show just looking drab. There's something about watching this revival that I don't feel like saying the adjective of soulless matches how I truly feel, but it does feel like it was a sanitized version of the show. Even though they allowed cursing in this version, you saw that pretty much for the first time without it getting bleeped, and for the most part, it could have been uncensored. There's just something about it that kind of feels corporate, and I don't know how to put my finger on it to the pulse, but something about it does feel a little corporate and cookie cutter. Something that I don't think Malcolm in the Middle's original run was at all. I think it was groundbreaking for its time because it was raw and real. And I feel like here you get a glimpse of that from time to time, but it really just comes off like a corporate, you know, manifestation of nostalgia baiting or nostalgia farming. Which you can say that about any reunion special in the history, like the Brady Bunch reunions or whatever show that did them. Sure. But here, as a lifelong fan, I just wish that wasn't the case. So yeah, you know, all said and done, Malcolm in the Middle, Life Still Unfair, season 1. Because I'm such a lifelong dedicated fan, yes, I literally just talked about this for like 45 minutes. I would say I really like this. I think that it's a good stepping stone to have a stronger season 2 if they wanted to come back, or maybe even a future spinoff, maybe without Frankie Muniz in the picture. I would love to see all these actors, you know, show their craft there if they want to make money again and make people happy. I do like the reception this show is getting now, where reviews are starting to balance out. For me, when I first watched it, I think I was kind of bummed with a few things. I was being a little harsh. I would have probably given it like a 6.5 out of 10. Now, I'm kind of leaning like a 7.5 out of 10. I don't think it's the greatest thing in Malcolm in the Middle ever, nor do I think it's like top 10 like must see things from the show. But it does have a lot of heart, and it is made in mind for the people that grew up with the show. It's just know going in, not everything's going to fit perfectly because it is 20 years down the line. These characters are older. It's not going to hit the same because the main characters that we knew when they were young kids are no longer young kids anymore. They're adult characters, so we have to deal with them in this stage of their life. And maybe that can still work, but I don't know. Like, just taper your expectations with that, and I think you'll enjoy it way more. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Malcolm in the Middle. Life is Still Unfair. Let me know down in the comment section if you watched this very long and thorough review from me. What did you think about the show? I'm dying to know. And are you excited for a potential season 2 at some point? See you next time.